Hey everyone, and today we're going to talk about ideation, which is so important for innovation and creativity. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, Kario, Innovation and Value Creation Expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I have Roy Bendor Cohen. Yeah, so happy to see you.
Yeah,
Uh,
great.
Roy is the founder of Q Behavior Thinking, and it's going to be so interesting. So I'm sure about that. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and I'd like to invite you to join the discussion and ask questions. We'd love to hear what you think. Okay, we can start. So, what are the essential components for great ideation?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me, Adi, and thank you for the audience. And I'm very happy to be here. The components of a great ideation, um, I would say there are three or four things that you should take into account. So first of all, the people or the team that you want to have in the room, um, it should be an interdisciplinary team, basically people that can bring in different perspectives and knowledge into the challenge that we are discussing. The second one would be being offsite. And this is now in the area of COVID, period of COVID, this is a bit weird, but
Yeah.
you really want people to be disconnected from the day to day, to create the right mindset and, to be without their phones, not next to, the office where people can disturb them. The third thing is that you will need a moderator. So someone that can, manage the discussion, make sure that people are focused on the challenge and making sure that they create the right mindset so people build on each other's ideas and not kill each other's ideas, managing the resistance in the room. And the fourth thing is a method. You'll need some kind of method that creates structure for the conversation to be able to help people to get out of their comfort zone to come up with creative ideas different from what they used to do.
Yeah, I did not indicate that you had a few years in SIT, so some people might know this method. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, SIT or systematic inventive thinking is both a methodology and a company that was established 25 years ago. And for me, I might be biased, but it's the best methodology for ideation. Basically, let's say the principles of SAT are that you innovate inside the box. So you use existing resources in order to come up with innovative ideas. And the main thing is that we have what we call the cognitive fixedness, the methodology is helping to overcome those. So basically the reason why people come up with non-creative ideas is because these cognitive fixedness that are not help. It's like a kind of glasses or a filter or let's say a barrier that doesn't allow you to look ahead of what's in there.
Yeah.
So that's a bit about the setting. I might share more about them in the rest of the day.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, why great ideation is not enough, and what is missing in order to create value? Most people, when they think about innovation, they think about the fun part. I'll have a very good idea, and then we'll have this wonderful product, and then we'll make billions out of it. And it's not so real. So, and you
Yeah.
see it in startups too. They think that the idea is everything, and they really believe that this will bring them the exit that they dream about, but it's not enough, right?
Yeah. Um, so there are different aspects to this. Of course, the ideas are great, and I think ideas are the spark, or you need the good idea to be able to innovate. It's like a necessary condition, but not enough. And I think what's needed, it's the before and after. So I would say if you start an ideation process without really understanding the challenge or the problem you're trying to solve, um, let's say the ideation is part of the solution space.
Right,
But
right.
you want to explore the problem space before. And I think this is very important to gain some insights, deep insights about the challenge. and then based on that, these insights to start innovating, ideating. That's the before part. The after part, it's basically once you have these ideas, you have to test them out before you start implementing and scaling. And I think the testing is a very crucial part of it, like to understand really what are the assumptions of this idea that you need to refute or to make sure that they're right to be able to proceed. And I think there's another element of courage. Yeah, my accent. So basically, I think what I see a lot is people have great ideas, but they're afraid to pursue them and they go all in, as they say in poker. And I think that's another component that is very important because people are risk averse, and then they have a great idea, but they not necessarily want to pursue it all the way because there's a lot of risk in it. And that's
of
also
course.
part of it.
Yeah. This is part of being an entrepreneur. So you need to believe that this is true. And even if you fail, and you might or even surely fail, I would say, what happens then? So it's not what you expected. What do you do then? And what you said about the beginning, about understanding the problem, most people don't want to be too much involved in problem and in general to really understand the origins of the problem. They are jumping to the solutions like in a flash. It's really easy to say, okay, let's fix it. This is how we fix it. And dealing with the problem domain is what you do right now with your new hat in Q behavioral thinking, is really understanding the behavior of people in order to understand what could you offer them. What are the things that might be a problem that you could solve with this idea or solution, right?
Yeah. So I think it's all a matter of focus at the end of the day. So I think, in my perspective, in SAT, we focused a lot on the solution phase in the ideation, and I think this was great. Like, this is an amazing company, and it was able to come up with very interesting ideas. Today, I think I'm focusing a lot more on the problem space and specifically in understanding behavior. Because I think once you understand, the deep, and I really mean deep insights about how women, how people behave in a context. And it doesn't matter if it's a service or a product or a business model or something that you want, helping people recycle. It doesn't really matter what is the challenge. You really need to understand the basics of how people operate in that space. And I think then afterwards, the ideation phase will be much more focused, and the ideas will be much more valuable in that sense.
Yeah. I think that once you really understand why people are doing some of the things that they're doing, because in many cases, lots of companies, they have the numbers. They know that the sales are going down. They know that their users might be leaving or using less, but they don't really know why. What's the behavior beneath it, other than saying, okay, we have competitors. That's it. It's just not enough to understand, because the solution is derived from the understanding of this behavior. And
Exactly.
if they don't understand that, they might have a good solution, maybe, but it's not the right solution, and that will not solve the problem.
It's maybe a great solution for a different problem. That's why they say, I think it's a design thing, right? First do the right things and then do things right. Or Peter Drucker says, no, there's the worst thing you can happen is to have a great solution for the wrong problem. But I want to refer to something you just said, because the question why is one of my favorites out of all the WH questions. And it's true what you say, and I think that's also a bit of the difference between market research or even consumer insights and behavioral insights, which is the field I'm in. That I think the first, market research is about the what's happening. So it gives you really great numbers that tell you the segmentation and who is buying what, and if we're talking about purchasing behaviors. But I think what's interesting is the why. And when I say why, is the deep psychological explanation of why people do something or don't do something. And then you're right. Once you have that, then solutions come up, even, you know what, sometimes without ideation. It just pops up,
Yeah.
in a snap, once you
Yeah.
understand these phenomenon.
Yeah, in general, I think that most people think about the solution because this is what their job is, because they need to build something or a service or a product, and they're very focused on that. And then they say, oh, what would we build for something? And this something, and especially in big companies, you see the connection with the users and clients and customers is not as much as in as in small companies and in startups. They really want to understand. And the fact that you are going into the mind of your customer gives you so many insights and so much more than just taking the numbers, because these are people. And the fact that somebody decided to do something different means that he has a different need, that this is not answering the needs, that he's like, there are so many circumstances out there to make him decide something different. And right now we have everything is changing around us. So many people are changing behaviors. And if you don't understand why, you might just believe that, this is the reason, or like in general. So we have one LinkedIn question or remark. So innovation is also to learning to let an initially promising idea, this is an idea he wrote me, go. If you validate, there won't be value for user customer. For a lot of highly emotional involved innovator, this is a hard but needed lesson. Yeah, I totally agree. Letting go of an idea is something that, especially if you started to do something, if you started to build something, and then you found out it's not what you thought. You had this assumption, you tested it out, and maybe it's not the right solution, it's not the right way to go, and maybe it's not answering the goals of your company or of the users, and it needs to be matched. So in general, I think the emotional roller coaster that is needed from innovator is immense, and they need to really understand that they're going to go through ups and downs, which is always
there's a
hard.
very interesting term that was coined by Richard Thaler, the Nobel laureate, and one of the pioneers of behavioral economics. The endowment effect. Basically, the endowment effect means that you give much more subjective value to things that you own, or that you perceive that you own. And that's why people sometimes, the first idea that they have is the idea that they love most and they pursue. I would see it in, I would lead many, for more than 7 years now, ideation workshops. And what you see is always the same structure. So at the beginning, people are, especially when you bring in a method that lets them out of their comfort zone, they're very resistant. And they not necessarily collaborate, and they don't understand why they have to apply all these tools. But then something interesting happens. A great idea comes up. And now they cannot let go of this specific idea. And what we know from research is that the first idea is not necessarily the best one. It's one of many.
Yeah.
And actually, if you even look at many ideas, the more you push people to the latter ones, you'll get more creative ideas.
Right.
But people always, first of all, they have this resistance, and then once the first idea comes, they stick into it, and they're not letting go until you really push them to let go of this idea to the following ones, promising them that they will be evaluated at the end, all of the ideas together.
Yeah. I totally understand the fact that, that's a great idea, and everybody's saying it's a great idea, and you have this like joined experience of, wow, we did it. And it's when I do design sprints, you see it in the beginning of the process. It's a few days, and then everyone is very hyped. But in the end, you need to really test it out, and then sometimes there is a disappointment because it's not what you think, and it's so much better to devaluate what you're doing. Like if you're having evaluation and it's this is validated, this is exactly what I want, it's great. But most of the time, it's better to know in advance that this is not the right direction. You can pivot, you can do something else, but investing all the energy and resources and talking to people and just making them buy in the idea and then understanding it's not the right direction. It's so much harder.
Yeah.
So it's better to know it in advance.
I think also if you think about the definition of innovation, there are many, of course. If you go, Google them, you'll find a lot. But I think if you find a common theme, is that one component is novelty or some newness, and the other one is value. And then of course there's usability, there's ability and feasibility. All of these are, but let's focus on novelty and value, because these I think are the essentials. So I think people, when they encounter something new, there's an effect. There's like almost a eureka moment that happens there. And the novelty is attracting our attention and make us feel like excited. But we shouldn't forget the value part. And I think that's the thing is that happens a lot of the times after the ideation, because you really need to see if this amazing breakthrough idea is going to be if the user or the customer or whoever you're designing this idea for is as excited and for the long term, because they can be excited and they can say, by the way, that's another thing you learn in cognitive psychology. People not necessarily say and do the same thing. Like you can say, this would be great, and then
it's like the difference between what is a survey and what is like going and seeing people what they're doing actually and not what they're saying. So it's two different types of research. So we have a few comments here. First, Steph. So hi, Steph. So happy to see you here. And second one is, you know what? This is a great question because I have it already done. So what are the methods and sessions you could or should do with innovation teams? So thank you. This is the LinkedIn user that asked this question.
Yeah. Okay. So as I promised, I will talk about SAT.
Yeah.
The method is just, first of all, it's something that was developed in the university, and by the history. It's interesting. There's a method called TRIZ. It's a method for problem solving, a Russian Soviet method, but it was developed in Israel by two professors and Amnon Levav, who is the co-founder of the company, and basically. The idea there is that you use constraints on your thinking in order to come up with more creative ideas, which is actually, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? Because innovation sounds like something outside of the box, without any constraints, without like total freedom. But what we've seen in these years of experience, and also research shows the same, is like the more you constrain your thinking, and there are different tools. Actually, there are 5 different tools for ideation in SAT.
Yeah.
And this helps you to constrain your thinking and use only existing resources in order to ideate. And the secret sauce, or the reason it works is, again, these cognitive fixedness or cognitive biases that don't allow us to think beyond the trivial or the banal in the day-to-day.
Yeah, we think we know. We know.
Yeah,
we want to know. We want to believe that we know. And that's why we're so sure most of the time, because this is what we want it to be. We want to have the right answer all the time. And it's hard for us to be in uncertainty, and it makes us anxious. And that's why we jump into a solution or an answer or a fix to something, because the unknown is hard. The biggest fear of people is the fear of the dark. Why are we afraid of the dark? Because we don't know what's out there. Yeah. So I think it's more or less like that. And it's really interesting.
Uncertainty and ambiguity are 2 very important words in the field of innovation. I think people maybe they do know that, but like there's a lot of anxiety. And by the way, 2020 is exactly a year that we are seeing.
Yeah, we can talk about anxiety right now, right? Uncertainty and anxiety. This is like the name of 2020. Yeah.
The interesting thing is that even when you do this, when you apply these different tools, and you already break fixedness, people immediately their intuitive reaction is to find a ground, like a stable ground. So you let them imagine a situation of, I don't know, organizational structure that doesn't have a CEO, and they immediately try to find something that will like either a category or definition that they already know that is familiar, so they have a safe ground to be in.
Right.
And it's such a human thing to do, right? Because
Right.
you can be outside of your comfort zone for a moment, but not for a long moment. You have to stabilize somehow. And I think that's how the innovation process works, by the way. Like you have to, every time, to break something or, shake one thing, but then keep all the other things stable, because if you try to shake everything, then
we see it right now. Everything is shaking, so it's not, we have like an experiment. So hi Gali, thanks for the question. And she's asking about ideation for entrepreneurs, and if as if you were an employee in a company, so what would you do as an entrepreneur? And like when you're a very small team, and thanks Gali, and where you're a startup, it's not like in a big company and you have someone from tech and someone from, like what you talked about, diversity, and they have a very small team and they don't always know how to do it. And I always tell them, bring people in, and don't be afraid to tell your story and tell what you're working on. In many cases, entrepreneurs are so afraid, that somebody would steal their idea. But as we just started to talk about, the idea is not that important. And even in research that found what are the aspects that makes a startup successful, he was not the first one. So it was the idea, the team, the timing, so forth. And it seems the timing was the most important. And I would say team, but no, it seems that. So in general, I would tell Gali that ideation needs to be like joining brain power. You cannot do it alone. And therefore, it needs to be with people. What would you say?
I completely agree. As an entrepreneur myself, in the last 3 years, I can say that the first year I was very reluctant to share my idea, and I think now I realize that no, the opposite is true. You have to share as much as possible, and actually you have to look for disagreement. It's interesting because there are many people that are either your friends or people that support you that you will always like tell you, yes, it's a great idea, like, and I think the disagreements are the interesting parts. People that, if you appreciate the person, sometimes people just criticize.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Most people, I think, would criticize like immediately, as I see it. It's like the first thing is like, no, that's not a good idea. Like that's the first thing that comes into your mind most of the cases. And you need to find these people that would say, yeah, let's think about it together.
So there's an interesting principle when in SAT again, when we would lead a workshop. It's called benefits before challenges, and basically it's a norm in the room. So you're not allowed to say if someone suggested an idea, the first thing that you do is list the benefits and the opportunities of this idea, and only then you can go for the challenges. But not the other way around. And now the way it's a genius. It's such a simple principle, but it changes everything, because people are so, especially when we talk about creative ideas, and it's something new, but it's something unfamiliar, and something unfamiliar is something that we usually try to avoid. So you almost say, this is broken, this won't work, this, and you give a million of reasons why not. And then when you switch and you say, okay, we'll get to these challenges, but let's talk about benefits and opportunities first, all of a sudden very interesting things happen, because after a few minutes, people all of a sudden come up with a benefit that they wouldn't have thought before if you wouldn't have told them, wait 3 minutes before you go for the challenges. So I think this is a great, is very important. As opposed to brainstorming, I would say not every idea is a good idea. There are some very shitty ideas out there. So don't. And it's important in the ideation itself not to keep on discussing bad ideas. So that's why it's very important to scope in advance the challenge, and a moderator that will help you, focus the conversation and not discuss things that are outside of scope. And focus on the important things, and managing resistance. That it's, I said uncertainty and ambiguity, but resistance is like almost hand in hand with innovation. These are the
I think that when you talk about facilitator and about resistant, and this happens in corporates, but when you're a small startup, you have less resistance. Everybody's like very hyped and happy together. Sometimes they are less criticizing, even if it's
Yeah,
needed, because they want to believe in the story that they're telling investors and telling outside. And sometimes they're right. They need to go through a resistant in order to really get what they want. And sometimes maybe it's not that good and you need to change it a bit.
yeah,
And every startup and every entrepreneur knows that what he starts with will not be the last solution that he builds, because it will change for sure. And they know that this is what they're going for. They're going for the unknown, and they're on the way. They're doing the
yeah,
pivots and changes, and it's exciting to think that people are so flexible in the way they think, if they can be
yeah.
so flexible.
So two things interesting here. First, I think, yeah, every entrepreneur knows that this is what's going to happen, but I think knowing and feeling it is two different things.
Yeah,
And then
of
you know that this
course.
will happen, and once you encounter it, it's much, much harder.
Sure.
And I think so. So knowledge in that sense is not enough. It's a progress. It's just a. And the other thing is resistance. You would be surprised, comes in many different types and colors and shapes, and even in startups, and even not in startups, in a one man, the founder by himself or by herself. There's so many types of resistance that we sometimes don't realize that it's there, and only in the aftermath we realize that this was resistance.
Yeah. I think that in general, when people think about startups, they think about the technology, they think about the solution, they think about the exit. This is what they think about. But actually, it's much more emotional than people think. It's much more a roller coaster. It's much harder to really go through these stages, even if you know that it will take time until you get to this investor or VC that will give you money. You know it will take time, especially if you're new and it's your first startup. You know it, but then you go and you get the no and no, no, no again and again. It's so hard to continue believing in yourself. So it's like so different than one from the other. And I totally agree that resistance and resilient on the other side to resistant is really
Yeah.
important. So we have two more people. Hi, Ajit. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we have a question from Steph. So he has an assumption that people in Israel or France give more honest feedback, more confrontational sometimes than in other cultures. Is it true? Do you see it as an asset for innovation? Thanks, Steph. What do you? I'm going to take it off so you see each other.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? I have an idea, but what do you think, Roy?
So that's a great question. It's a great question because when I say that resistance has different shapes and colors, it's because at my work I visited more than 20 countries, and I'm lucky to speak Spanish, so that I was also on the side of Latin America, in Japan, China, Singapore, and also in Europe in different countries, including France. So what you see is on the one hand, there's many commonalities, like cognitive fixedness is common in every country, like it's similar in every culture. So
it's just human.
But the interesting thing is that the resistance comes up in a very different ways. So and I think one of the things that what was the France and the Israel feedback, there's something true about it. At least I feel that in Israel, when I did workshops, they are the most skeptical, cynical at the beginning of the workshop, but and they're very there's too honest feedback, like in the sense that
rude. You could say it's rude. Yeah.
The good thing is that if you manage to break the fixedness, you manage to come up with ideas, and the workshop is successful, you'll also know that. So they will, the more cynical and skeptical people will be your best ambassadors afterwards.
Right.
I feel that in some cultures, I can talk, again, I'm generalizing because it also depends on from company to company, organization, but
sure.
In Latin America, for example, I felt that there's hierarchy and seniority is is very strong. Like here in Israel, where like the boss says something, you're like like it's like you can challenge what he said, right?
Yeah.
He or she. But in Latin America, they wouldn't speak. Like sometimes you see that the big boss or the manager has to go step out of the room, and only then people will start having a more open conversation. I felt in my work with France that yes, the feedback is I don't know if honest is the right thing, but is you have to, there's less layers that you need to
you get it to it's up front, it's in front of you.
In the States, I had I had a feeling that it's, for me as an Israeli, it's very hard to read the culture. Like I would do a 3-day workshop, and only in the last day I would realize it wasn't good. But,
yeah. And in Israel, it will never happen. You will feel like from day one, you will know that.
from second one, that so I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I just say that you have, as a moderator, you have to know your audience in a deep manner, and it comes with experience or with some research or learning. But I have, again, my preference, or every person has his preference of where it's easier to work. I think the Israeli culture for being very, very direct, even too direct. Sometimes there are some advantages to it as well.
Very small advantages. I agree, Steph, what you're saying. I think that the fact that people are very upfront and saying what they're thinking is really, it could make things faster. Because if you need to take off the layers and it takes so long, and people are thinking twice and third time before they say something, they just hold themselves back, and it takes time until you get this out of them. So as a moderator, you need to know how to do it exactly and who to talk to. By the way, the one who is the most criticizing person, I always tell them, you have to bring them in. So this person has to be within the room. You cannot just say, okay, he will say so many bad things, he will be against anything. Like, this is the person you need in, because if not, you will get it afterwards. So just bring him in, as I see it.
Many times we've done workshops, they would try to, there's some functions or some departments that they try to avoid, right? Finance, legal. So, but you must bring in these people, because their perspective is super important. And I think with the right mindset and with the right tools, these people that usually are the people who criticize, they come up with the solutions.
And more than that, they could bring in their own perspective of what could be problematic. Because if you come to finance afterwards and they say, okay, we cannot do it, no way, or to legal, they say this is like not in the way that we conduct business, whatever. If you take them in, you get their feedback and you can act upon it within the situation of creation. Because you don't want to get the feedback that is no way afterwards. So if you get their buy-in to the process, it's so important, and you have another less steps on the way to success. I would say it's very important.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, so why is it so difficult for corporates to innovate?
Wow. There's many different answers for this, but I think this one thing that is I think everybody talks about innovation, or a lot of nowadays it's like became a buzzword. Everyone wants to innovate, but I'm not sure deep inside, like we like to talk about innovation, but we don't like change, right? And again, change and innovation is like two almost they're connected. So I think corporates, and again, I'm generalizing. I know that there are different culture of corporates, but in general, corporate culture, I think, is very risk averse. So the KPIs people have and the incentive system is not really motivating people to take risks, because failure is, when you take a risk, there's especially when innovation, sometimes the risk is very high, probability of failure is high, and then people better to have like a safer decision and not failing. Another interesting thing is, I mentioned Amnon Levav, the co-founder of SAT, wrote an interesting article about, there was a discussion about whether innovation is bottom-up or top-down, right? Is it pushed from senior leadership or from and basically, first of all, he says, of course, it's both, but the most important thing is that the middle layer, the middle management are usually the gatekeepers, and they are usually the people who are most resistant for innovation, and there's a reason for that. Senior leadership is easy to say that you want to innovate, and they really do believe that they want to innovate, and people, let's say from lower hierarchy also, but the middle management needs to deliver results. And I think the innovation is sometimes something more long-term, and then you have, day-to-day KPIs that you need to deliver. And I think this is the risk aversion together with this hierarchy, the hierarchy of corporates. And then the question is really whether you want to do an innovation circus, because people, it's a buzzword. Everyone wants they do hackathons and they do all these amazing things to be able to communicate it. But deep inside, they don't really want to change. And I think this is, look, one of my biggest clients was Bayer, 120,000 people, it's 150 years of amazing, corporate. And how, it's very difficult to find a balance between keeping what's working, tradition that makes everything work, and then at the same time innovate. And there's a balance that you have to find.
I totally agree. We talked about the fact that you need to bring people that are disagreeing with you, and we had a very nice comment from Nicole, and she said, "Without friction, no shine." I love that one. I never heard that, but I really thank you, Nicole, for that. And I totally agree. And we're almost done. So I need to select the last question right now. It's hard. We have such a long list. So what is the most surprising thing you learned about innovation after all these years of experience?
Wow. This question? I think, let me try to say three things if we have time. I think, first of all, I don't know if it's trivial at this point or not, but I realize that innovation is, first of all, we understand innovation is a mindset. But the interesting thing is that innovation is not only in the product space. I think many people, when they think about innovation, they think about a technological innovation or product. But if you think about it, innovation can happen on so many other places. And actually, the other spaces are, we see that are, I don't know, Airbnb, Uber. It's different areas, or Tesla. Sometimes it's not about only the innovation is not only about the product, but it's sometimes about the channels of distribution, the processes, the operation, the finances, the different aspects of the business model canvas with you. Look at it, or the customer segments. I think that's, sometimes the innovations or the disruptive innovation happen not necessarily in the product itself and other areas. Another thing is, again, as I said, I think the resistance part. So people, the gap between how much people I met that want to do innovation, or say that they want to do innovation, and how many people are really willing to do the change. I realize that people talk about innovation, and once it comes, and I see it as myself 3 years now as an entrepreneur, and I have a team of 15 amazing freelancers that we create an organization model that is very different. We call it the pirate model, and the amount of resistance that we have because of how new it is and how different it is from what we know. It's hard. Like you always try to to hold on to something that you know. So that's the second thing. And the last thing would be a bit philosophical, but at this point, I'm not really sure what innovation is.
There's so many things.
It's like, after so many years working in innovation and so many different definitions that I came up, I encountered, maybe that's why I switched to behavioral insights, because it's more complete. I know what behavior is, something that you can somehow measure. I think, again, it's maybe in a few years' time I would realize that not, but I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. So where could people hear more about your work and about Q behavioral thinking, and how can they find you?
Yeah, I guess LinkedIn. There's a LinkedIn page, also Kario Behavior Thinking. We have a website. Yeah, you can contact us through a D.
Yeah. So we're
Uh,
joining forces, and
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that, and it's going to be
yeah,
exciting. So I'm
yeah.
so happy for that, and I want to thank everyone who joined us. And we had so many comments, and it was lots of fun. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining me. And I'll see you next week. And you're much invited to check out invincibleinnovation.com. And have a great day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.